He said it flat, no hesitation, no stumble. Just cold eyes and a polished voice as he leaned against the edge of my desk. "You're too old to lead." He didn't blink when he said it, like he'd practiced it in the mirror that morning. There was no conversation, no apology, just those words. 5 syllables that hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I remember the way the room felt in that moment. Quiet, tense, like the air had thickened around us. The hum of the ceiling lights suddenly louder than usual. My chair creaked as I slowly leaned back, taking him in. Carter looked comfortable, too comfortable. Navy blue suit sharp enough to slice through what little dignity he thought I had left. His silver tie pin caught the office lights. His hands rested calmly in his lap, but his eyes were already drifting toward the door, like this was just another meeting on his checklist. "Is that all?" I asked. He gave a soft shrug, like it was out of his hands. "The board wants new energy, new direction. You've been the backbone, but we think it's time to pass the torch." His voice was smooth, professional, but there was a flicker in it, just a hint of discomfort when he said, "we." I could tell he didn't want to say it himself, so he hid behind the board. Coward. Behind him, the glass wall of my office showed the hallway. Devin stood there, pretending to check his phone, but his eyes kept flicking up. Waiting. He had that fake concern on his face. The kind young men wear when they know they've won but still want to seem polite about it. I didn't stand right away. I let the silence stretch. Carter cleared his throat and slid a manila envelope across the desk toward me. "HR has your package. Severance.
Nedea.
All the formalities." He glanced toward the door and added, "Security will escort you out once you've packed up." I looked at that envelope but didn't touch it. My hands stayed folded in my lap. My voice came out even quiet. "After 29 years. That's it?" He didn't respond, just stood, buttoned his jacket and said, "You'll be fine, Harold." Then he walked out like a man finishing a chore. Devin stepped in with a clipboard and a corporate smile. "I'll give you a few minutes," he said, his voice too chipper, too rehearsed. "If you need help with the boxes." "I don't." I cut in, looking him dead in the eyes. His smile faltered. He stepped back like he felt the chill in the room and didn't want to stay long enough to understand it. The moment the door shut behind him, I finally stood. The office looked different somehow. Smaller. Hollow. The books on the shelf, the photo of the first team I ever hired, the paperweight Carter gave me 10 years ago. It all felt like props now. I pulled a small box from under my desk and started filling it. A few pens. My father's old watch. The blueprint. It hung on the wall beside my desk. The original design for the system that built our company. I took it down carefully, laying it flat inside the box. My name was in the bottom right corner, clear as day. Black ink on faded parchment. I stared at it for a long moment. That was the first thing Carter ever asked me to build. Back then, we were just 2 guys in a basement running on caffeine and blind ambition. Carter had the pitch, the vision. I had the skills. He used to call me the engine. Said I was the reason any of it worked. Now I was a liability, a number too high on the spreadsheet. The guard who showed up at my door looked barely 30. Nervous. He didn't make eye contact. "I'm just here to walk you out, sir." I nodded. Didn't say a word. Just picked up the box and followed him down the hall I helped design. Past the break room I stocked myself in the early years. Past the wall with team photos. My face was in half of them, but no one looked up. No one stopped to say goodbye. In the elevator, I stood straight while the guard fidgeted beside me. The doors closed slowly, sealing everything behind me. My work, my years, my trust, gone in a blink. It wasn't until I was in my car that the weight really settled. I gripped the steering wheel, staring out at the rain tapping against the windshield. I didn't feel rage. Not yet. Just a kind of hollow ache in my chest, like something had been yanked out without warning. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just drove. My house felt colder than usual when I stepped inside. I made tea the way I always did. 1 sugar.
No milk.
The steam curled up like a ghost from the past. I sat at the dining table, staring out the window into the dark yard. My fingers wrapped around the mug tightly. The air smelled like old wood and silence. That's when I noticed the blueprint again, unfolded now, resting on the table beside me. The corners frayed, but the ink still bold. The curves of the system, the logic paths, the signature, my name, my patent. Carter never asked about it. Probably thought he'd buried it under contracts and corporate structure. But he forgot the most basic rule of creation: whoever builds it first owns it. I leaned back, heart steady now. The pain hadn't left, but it was changing shape. It wasn't just about being fired anymore. It was about the lie, the betrayal, the erasure. I thought about the years I'd held that patent, never once using it for leverage. I believed in what we built, believed in Carter. I thought I was protecting something bigger than both of us. But now I saw it clearly. This wasn't just a push toward retirement. This was a theft. I picked up the blueprint and held it close, reading every line like scripture. My name at the bottom, the dates, the number. I still held the patent. I just never thought I'd need to use it. The funny thing about power is the ones who chase it forget who handed them the map. Carter never looked back. He didn't have to. He stood on my shoulders so long. He forgot there was a man beneath him. A man who did the hard work. A man who filed the papers. The week after I was fired, I pulled down the box from my attic. It was dusty, heavy, and taped with that brown packing strip I always used. Inside, all my early documents, receipts, code printouts, handwritten notes from the startup days. But what I really wanted was near the bottom. A folder labeled IP, proprietary in thick red ink. I placed it on my dining room table, opened it slowly, and stared down at the form that started it all. United States Patent and Trademark Office. Title: Modular Logic Routing System for Distributed Task Execution.
Inventor: Harold R. Maddox.
My name, my design, my system. I remembered the night I filed it. Carter was pacing, anxious, shouting about getting servers online by Monday. We didn't have enough funding yet. No legal team. Just me, a bottle of coffee, and a $20 filing fee I paid out of my own pocket. I told him I'd cover it until we got real lawyers. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Handle it, Harold," he said, already thinking about pitches and headlines. He never asked how I did it. Never checked what name I put on the papers. He just assumed I'd filed it under the company or under both our names. But back then, there was no company. Just an idea, a prototype, and me doing the paperwork while he planned the future. I sat back in my chair now, staring at the dated signature at the bottom. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from memory. Not even Carter knew this detail anymore. Not after so many years. Not after all the success and scaling and boardroom tables. He forgot who actually owned the spine of his empire. I didn't move fast. I wasn't out for flames. Not yet. I needed to know why now? Why like that? The firing didn't feel like company politics. It felt surgical, precise, like I'd been removed before something big. So I started watching, quietly. Their press releases became my daily reading. I followed updates on the company's site, LinkedIn announcements, blogs from employees I once mentored. Devin was being pushed hard in the media. Next-gen thinker, they called him. Modernizer of legacy code. He talked in interviews about overhauling outdated systems. But I knew what that meant. He was ripping out my name and stapling his to the work I wrote in my basement 15 years ago. Carter, he stayed behind the scenes.
No statements. No interviews.
That wasn't his style. He was plotting something, and I was determined to find out what. Then Nolan called. He sounded nervous, like he wasn't sure if I'd even take the call. "Hey, Mr. Maddox," he said.
Sorry.
"I know this is weird." I smiled into the phone. "It's not weird, Nolan. It's good to hear your voice." He hesitated. "I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I figured you'd want to know. What is it?" "They're selling the system," he said quickly. "The whole back end. To a defense contractor. Big one. I don't know which, but the legal team's been all over it. They're checking the code, the patent history. Everything." I leaned forward, heartbeat steady, brain clicking into gear. Do they need proof of IP ownership? Yeah, 100. That's why I called. I saw your name was missing in the presentation materials. Not even a mention. He didn't have to say more. I thanked him and hung up. So that was it. This wasn't just a cold goodbye. This was a cleanup job. Carter needed to erase me. I wasn't too old. I was a risk. A loose thread that could unravel the whole deal. They thought they could snip it quietly. Pay me off. Bury the records. Bet on me staying silent. They didn't know I kept everything. Over the next 2 days, I turned my study into a war room. Stacks of papers. Thumb drives. External hard drives from old backups. Emails printed out with timestamps. Source logs that showed exactly when code was committed and under whose name. I organized everything chronologically. Design drafts. Internal memos. Screenshots from the early builds with metadata still intact. I even found the original README file, my signature still inside the header comment. And then I called the patent attorney. He picked up on the third ring. Harold? He said, surprised. Haven't heard from you in years. I need a quick confirmation, I said. Patent? Filed March 11th, 2006. Who owns it? He didn't hesitate. You do.
Sole inventor.
Assigned to no corporate entity. You never transferred rights. Still enforceable? As long as you've paid maintenance fees, which you did, every year. Why? I might need to enforce it. A pause. Then a knowing sigh. I was wondering when someone would. When I hung up, I felt no anger. Just a strange calm. Like the earth had shifted back beneath my feet. They'd built an empire on something they didn't even legally control. I didn't file a lawsuit. I didn't call a reporter. I made a list instead, everyone who needed to see the truth. Everyone who would care when the moment was right. Their legal team, the buyers, the financial auditors, people who couldn't ignore a paper trail. This was no longer about hurt feelings. This was about theft. And I had the receipts. Carter thought he could erase me. But code doesn't forget. Patents don't forget. And I certainly hadn't. So I waited, watched, and listened as the ground beneath them began to crack. Carter was building his empire on sand. And I was holding the tide. I just had to wait for the right wave. Carter stood on a stage in Las Vegas. A velvet curtain behind him and lights framing his silver-touched hair like a halo. I watched through a hotel room television, the muted broadcast glowing against the dim walls. He was unveiling the same software platform I built, the same framework I had drawn on whiteboards 2 decades ago. I recognized the modular hierarchy, the tiered automation, the pivot language. It was mine. All of it. Except now, it had a new name. Streamlined branding, shiny colors, and his voice wrapped around every sentence like he'd birthed it himself. I didn't flinch. Not even a breath. I just leaned back in the stiff hotel chair, crossed my hands in my lap, and listened as he gave the same speech we'd rehearsed years ago in conference rooms with coffee-stained carpets and dying fluorescent lights. Back then, I'd speak first. Carter would polish the closer. Now he owned the stage and I wasn't even in the building. My phone buzzed quietly on the table beside me. An email notification. Subject: Due diligence final clearance. Tech rights confirmation pending. That was my window. While Carter smiled and shook hands on live television, I opened my briefcase. Inside, in a folder marked Emerald Design Group, founding documents, I had everything I needed: original source code drafts, handwritten notes from the initial prototype meetings, and most important, the patent. Patent, filed under my name, dated July 6, 2003. The crown jewel. I pulled out the frame certificate, the glass slightly chipped at the corner from the last move, and studied the signature line at the bottom. My name. Not Carter's. Not Devin's.
Mine.
For years, I never asserted it. Carter promised we'd handle legal restructuring, after the Series B funding, and then after the IPO, and then after we expanded to Europe. The time never came. I let it go. I trusted him. That trust had a cost and I was done paying. I spent that night drafting a single-page letter. It wasn't angry.
No threats.
No dramatic legal jargon. Just facts calmly stated. I outlined the patent's origin, its relevance to the current product architecture, and my sole ownership of the technology at the center of the acquisition. I included a scanned letter from the law firm we used back in '03, confirming the filing and my role. The final paragraph simply read, "This letter is to ensure accurate legal review prior to any finalized agreements. I am available for further documentation or conversation, should you require." I mailed it the next morning, priority certified mail, to the acquiring firm's legal team. Then I drove back home, quiet and clear. 48 hours later, Carter's call came. I was in the garage organizing old tools when the phone buzzed. The screen just said Carter Wallace. I let it ring once before I answered. "Hello." There was a pause, long enough that I heard him inhale. "You sent them the patent?" His voice was flat, dry.
No warmth, no panic.
Just cold surprise. "Yes," I said calmly, rolling a socket wrench between my fingers. "They needed to know the truth." A pause. "You could have talked to me first." I smiled, just slightly. "Like you talked to me when you fired me?" In a glass room, 2 chairs, no warning, silence. "Why now?" he asked. "Why send it now?" I walked to the garage door and pulled it open. Late afternoon sun poured in. "Because you made me invisible, Carter. And now, I'm just reminding them who built what you're standing on." His tone shifted, more clipped now. "Look, we can work this out. We still have time to renegotiate. You want equity? A seat on the board again? Name your—" "I'm not interested in crumbs," I said. "Especially not from my own plate." I hung up. That weekend, I flew out to meet the acquiring firm's leadership. They invited me into a modest boardroom. Glass walls, long oak table, 3 attorneys and a lead executive named Marcus Feld. He was maybe mid-40s, polite but cautious. He greeted me with a firm handshake. "You're the original architect?" he asked. "I am." He nodded toward the stack of documents I brought. "We reviewed your letter. Legal confirmed everything." I explained the evolution of the platform, how it started in my basement office, how Carter joined after the second prototype, how he promised we'd finalize ownership after launch but never followed through. I didn't insult him. I didn't call him a liar. I just told the story with clear steps and verifiable records. One of the lawyers took notes like a stenographer, eyes barely blinking. By the end of the hour, Marcus leaned back and folded his hands. "You still believe in this platform?" "I never stopped," I said. He nodded slowly. "We're prepared to deal with you directly." A few handshakes, a verbal agreement. I left with a promise of paperwork the following week. That was it. Back home, I got an email from Devin. Short message, "I didn't know. If I did, I never would have signed off." I swear. Maybe that was true. Maybe not. I thought about replying. I didn't. Carter's downfall wasn't loud. It wasn't scandalous. It was just silent. Investors saw the acquisition collapse. Word spread. Confidence drained. 2 weeks later, he stepped down as CEO. To focus on personal matters, the statement said. But I knew better. He was done. The company limped along for a few months, no direction, no buyer. It folded quietly before the year ended. No headlines, no sympathy. But I was still standing. The new deal with the acquiring firm gave me full licensing rights. I retained ownership. They got access. We both won. And no one ever had to see a courtroom. Just the truth served cold. I didn't celebrate.
No champagne. No speeches.
Just a walk through the same garage where I first soldered the earliest prototype, scraps of wire still hanging from a pegboard. That was enough. Carter never called again. I didn't destroy him. I just removed what never belonged to him in the first place. The moment Carter's memo leaked, I read it in silence. It was predictable. A thin attempt to spin the story, call me disgruntled, and dismiss my claim as a miscommunication. No signature, of course. Just the company letterhead and that corporate tone that tries too hard to sound neutral. I didn't get angry. I just leaned back in my chair, hands folded, watching the cursor blink on my screen. Let them talk. Noise is cheap. But the silence that followed, that was earned. In the days that came after the acquisition collapsed, I kept moving forward. While Carter scrambled to put out fires and reassure investors, I sat in a small, sunlit office, mine this time, reviewing resumes. Not just anyone. Former engineers, designers, system architects, people I once mentored, who remembered the old lab before it was turned into a photo op backdrop. Some showed up in person. "You remember me?" Jonah asked, standing in my doorway in jeans and a windbreaker. His hair was longer now, but his eyes still burned with the same drive. "You taught me how to debug recursive loops in under an hour. I want to build again. For real this time." I nodded. "Pull up a chair." The office was simple. Clean white walls, a black leather couch, and a long glass table cluttered with sketches and circuit boards.
No plaqué.
No mission statement. Just a whiteboard already half filled with notes. Concepts I hadn't touched in years. I picked up a marker, underlined one idea 3 times. Adaptive biometric mesh. It had sat in a drawer when Carter called it too niche. Now it was our cornerstone. Revenue came quietly. The licensing deal matured quickly. The acquiring firm moved fast, hungry to roll out the software. They had their own team of compliance lawyers now, carefully checking every clause, every traceable origin. They credited me on every page. Meanwhile, Carter's world cracked. I watched the headlines, not sensational ones, just the slow bleed of trust. One tech blog wrote, "The vision behind the curtain was never his." Another asked, how much innovation was staged? I didn't call the journalists. I didn't need to. They found the story on their own. "He's trying to rebrand," Jonah said one morning, sliding his tablet across my desk. It showed Carter on stage in a cheap-looking auditorium. The audience was sparse. Some empty chairs in the front row. I looked at the headline. From CEO to Startup Whisperer, Carter Vance's next chapter. "Still wearing suits that cost more than his ideas," I muttered. Jonah chuckled. "You want me to reach out? Let him know we saw it."
No.
Let it be. The truth didn't need me to point fingers anymore. His own silence did the damage. After the memo failed to gain traction, even his board turned quiet. I heard whispers that he was left out of key meetings, that he'd pitch new products and get blank stares in return. One investor reportedly said, "We backed the wrong brain." I spent my days working. Each morning, I walked past the glass door with my name etched clean across it.
No initials. No gimmick.
Just Randall Ephraim Hayes in solid black lettering. I'd glance at it only once, not out of pride, but to remind myself of what had almost been erased. The young team around me thrived. I listened more than I spoke. When they asked for guidance, I gave it, but I never lectured. My goal wasn't to become another Carter. I didn't want to be followed. I wanted them to lead. One Friday, after most had gone home, I stood in the office alone. Rain tapped lightly against the window panes. The whiteboard behind me was filled edge to edge now. Some parts smudged, some circled in red. A prototype sat humming on the table, emitting a faint glow. I reached over and powered it down, fingers brushing the cool metal. I thought back to that day. The box in my arms had been light, just a few notebooks, some photos, and a fountain pen my father gave me. Carter never looked me in the eye when I left. He said, "You're too old to lead." Funny. The man who dismissed me as a relic was now recycling my words to smaller and smaller crowds. And I had become the thing he tried to imitate. A few months later, Devin reached out. His name popped up in my inbox. Subject line, "Just checking in." I opened it but didn't reply. What could he say now? That he didn't know? That he didn't mean it? Maybe it was true. But he'd stood beside Carter when it mattered. He backed the wrong man. That choice had weight. Still, I didn't hate him. I just didn't need him anymore. In the evenings, I mentored 3 interns from a local tech college. One of them, Malik, asked me during lunch, "How did you know to wait? To not explode when they took credit?" I looked at him for a long second. Because explosions burn everything. I wanted precision. He nodded slowly. "So this was all a plan?" I smiled.
No.
Just a correction. Carter was never taken down in some dramatic courtroom reckoning.
No exposes. No viral videos.
Just the sound of people forgetting. No more retweets.
No booked interviews.
He became a name mentioned with a shrug, followed by, "Didn't he work with someone else back then?" And I stayed steady. The work kept coming. The team grew. I taught them how to build not for applause, but for impact. How to own their names, their ideas, and never sign them away too easily. When I lock up each night, I pass that door again. I don't smile. I don't smirk. I just remember that first long walk away from the company I helped build, knowing they thought they were discarding weight. But I was never weight. I was the frame. I don't need to see Carter fall. I only needed to rise, to take back what was already mine. I only needed to take back what already belonged to me.